Story 1. The Trap. I thought I was just being clumsy. The small incidents, the misplaced shoes near the stairs, the loose rug in the hallway, seemed like nothing more than accidents. But the day I found the fishing line stretched across the bathroom doorway, nearly sending me tumbling, I knew something was very, very wrong. It started at work. I managed a team of 12 people, but last year I was assigned a 13th member, a man no other manager wanted to deal with. Let's call him Derek. He suffered from severe depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and obesity-related health problems. I was known for my patience with employees struggling with mental health, so I agreed to take him on, thinking I could help. At first, progress was slow but steady. I accommodated Derek's needs, shorter shifts, longer breaks, a reduced workload. But his performance never improved to an acceptable level. Then it got worse. He committed a severe breach of security, leaking sensitive information to an unauthorized person. I had no choice but to put him on formal disciplinary action. That's when everything spiraled. Derek went on indefinite sick leave. He claimed my bullying and harassment had caused a breakdown, making it impossible for him to work. He even reached out to a mental health advocacy group, portraying himself as a victim of workplace abuse. I had documented proof to the contrary, emails, signed statements, and records of accommodations. But I knew the accusation alone was enough to cast a shadow over my career. After 3 months, the meeting was set. Derek, his mental health advocate, my boss, and I would discuss his allegations. I prepared myself, knowing I had truth on my side. But truth alone would not be enough. The meeting started smoothly. I asked Derek how he was feeling and what steps he had taken toward returning to work. Then I brought up his accusations and asked for specific examples of bullying. He had none. He fumbled, saying that overhearing work-related conversations made him feel attacked. My boss firmly stated that holding employees accountable for their performance was not harassment. Even his own advocate hesitated. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. As the meeting ended, Derek's advocate asked me to step outside. "You need to be careful," she whispered. "He's not just lying about work. He has obsessions. He fixates." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but Derek has a history of attaching himself to people he sees as authority figures. When they don't behave as he expects, things get dangerous." That night I went home, my mind racing. The apartment felt off, like something had been disturbed. I brushed it off until I stepped into the bathroom and nearly fell. A near-invisible fishing line had been tied at ankle height across the doorway. My heart pounded as I checked the rest of the apartment. The stove's gas knob had been slightly turned on, just enough to leak without making a sound. The screws on my bookshelf had been loosened, ready to collapse. My world spun. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone wanted to hurt me. I called the police, but without clear evidence of forced entry, they couldn't do much. I changed the locks, installed cameras, and barely slept. The next day at work, Derek called in sick. Then he stopped answering emails. A week later, I heard he had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital after being found in his home, surrounded by scribbled notes about me. I moved. I left the job, the city, everything behind. The final report from the police confirmed my worst fears. Derek had been inside my apartment multiple times. They found his fingerprints on the gas knob, the fishing line, and the screws. To this day, I don't know how he got in. And I don't want to. Story 2. Bound by blood, defied by love. They're furious. Absolutely livid. All because I sent them a picture. One single wedding photo. My name is Lila, and for the past 2 years, I've been in love with Ethan. We met at one of those laid-back game nights at our friend Marco's place. Cheap snacks, too much soda, and hours of board games. Nothing fancy but enough to change my life. My parents, however, don't believe in love stories. At least, not the kind you get to write for yourself. They aren't wealthy traditionalists with sprawling estates and private jets. No, they're the kind that believe in sacrifice, obedience, and above all, family duty. In my home, my father's word is law, and my mother is the enforcer. Ethan and I were careful, keeping our relationship just beneath the surface. He played along at family gatherings, brought my mother flowers, which she shoved unceremoniously in the kitchen out of sight, and even attempted small talk with my father, who responded with little more than grunts. But yesterday everything changed. I arrived at our usual Sunday dinner, the same way I always had, stepping into the familiar scent of my mother's famous slow-cooked roast. My father sat in his usual recliner, TV blaring, while my younger sister, Ava, scrolled mindlessly on her phone. But something felt off. There were extra plates on the table. Who else is coming? I asked while helping my mother toss the salad. She didn't even look up. Mason and his father. My heart stilled. Mason was the son of my father's oldest friend, Victor. I barely knew him beyond the occasional handshake at family functions. A quiet, unremarkable guy, slightly older than me, with the kind of dull presence that makes walls seem fascinating. When they arrived, my mother laid out the nicest cuts of meat on Mason's plate, shooting me glances that made my stomach churn. Ava kept kicking me under the table, her eyes wide with unspoken warnings. Then, between the roast and the store-bought brownies, my father cleared his throat. "Lila, Victor and I have been talking." The sensation hit me like an oncoming storm. A deep, instinctive dread. "Mason is ready to settle down," Victor chimed in, grinning like he'd just won a lottery ticket. And we thought, what better way to bring our families together? Silence. Thick. Suffocating. I almost laughed, thinking it was some bizarre joke. But my father's next words shattered any illusion. "It makes sense. Victor and I are merging businesses. Mason will take over his father's position. A good match, don't you think?" My fork hovered midair. Mason stared at his plate like it held the answers to life itself. The brownie in my mouth turned to dust. I swallowed hard. "I'm dating Ethan." A muscle in my father's jaw twitched. My mother waved her hand dismissively. "That's just a childish phase. We're talking about your future." "You mean your business?" I said, voice cold. Dad leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Ethan is a nobody. Mason can provide for you, for this family. This isn't about love, Lila. It's about loyalty." Loyalty. A leash disguised as a virtue. I pushed back from the table. "I'm not marrying Mason." "You have until the end of the month to end things with that boy," my father snapped. "We're announcing the engagement at Victor's birthday party." I didn't answer. Just grabbed my bag and walked out the door. Ethan was waiting for me in his car down the street. We had planned a simple grocery run. Instead, I got in, hands shaking. That was yesterday. Today, my phone won't stop buzzing. Messages from my mother begging me to reconsider, from Ava warning me that Dad is serious, from distant relatives who suddenly have an opinion on my love life. Even my cousin Olivia called, wanting to know if it was true. Ethan and I spent last night in his cramped studio apartment, whispering about what to do next. We had been saving to move in together, but now it felt like we were at war. Then things got worse. The second battle. I thought my father was just being overbearing. I was wrong. It wasn't just about control, it was about survival. When I went home to grab my things, Ava was waiting for me, sick from college and full of secrets. "This is bigger than you think," she whispered as I shoved clothes into a bag. "Dad's in trouble." I froze. "What do you mean?" "The business is failing. Victor's too. They need this deal." A chill crawled up my spine. This wasn't about values. This was about keeping the family afloat. Then she dropped the real bomb. "They already booked the wedding venue." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "They put down a deposit. Mom's been showing everyone the receipt. She says you can't back out now." The room spun. The escape. Over the next few days, my parents tightened their grip. My work hours mysteriously got cut after my mother called my boss in tears, lamenting her rebellious daughter. My father threatened to disown me. Olivia reported that my mother had resorted to crying in the supermarket aisles. Ethan and I scraped together what little money we had, surviving on ramen and odd jobs. Our apartment plans fell through when the landlord rented to his nephew. Desperate, we considered moving into his friend Marco's spare room, a glorified garage, but at least it had a door. Then I saw it. A photo. A wedding invitation. It had my name. Mason's name. The date already set. I had never felt more trapped in my life. That's when Ethan and I made our choice. We eloped. The wedding that wasn't meant to be. It wasn't a fairy tale. The morning of, the zipper on my dress broke. Ethan's car refused to start. We had to split an Uber 3 ways with Marco just to get to the courthouse. But when we stood there, in front of the clerk who barely looked up from her lunch, nothing else mattered. Marco took pictures, blurry and awkward but perfect. The best one was of us laughing because I almost dropped my $12 wedding ring. Afterward, we shared a plate of fries at a dingy diner, sipping a milkshake because it was all we could afford. Then we posted it. A single photo. A simple caption. So we did a thing. The aftermath. My mother found out in the middle of a grocery run. She called me from the parking lot, sobbing so hard a store employee asked if she needed help. My father? He hurled his phone across the room. Victor stormed into their house. Mason, the supposed groom-to-be, liked our Instagram post and commented, "Congrats." That was the moment I knew. I had won. My father might cut me off, My mother might never forgive me. But I was free. And I chose love. Story 3. The quiet place. The cafeteria was nothing special. Just another quiet corner of St. Sebastian's Hospital, tucked away from the chaos of the city. For Ryan it was perfect. A refuge. A place where the noise of the world faded into the soft clinking of cutlery and the distant hum of conversations. He wasn't sick. He wasn't visiting anyone. He just worked nearby and found solace in the hospital's calm, away from the crowds and the deafening chatter of the outside world. Once a week, he sat at his usual table, sipped his coffee, and watched the world move around him. And then his sister found out. At first, it was just an irritated comment. You know those cafeterias are for patients and staff, right? Not just random people looking for cheap food. Ryan had laughed it off. I'm paying for it. It's not like I'm stealing someone's last meal. But his sister Melissa had a way of turning small things into full-blown wars. Soon their parents were involved. Phone calls, texts, lectures. How it was wrong, how he was taking advantage, how he needed to stop. But Ryan didn't stop. He wasn't breaking any rules. And honestly, their overreaction just made him want to dig his heels in deeper. Then things escalated. One night, after an exhausting day at work, Ryan locked up his bike in the backyard of his apartment. His only means of getting around the city. The next morning it was gone. Vanished. He called his parents first. Maybe one of them had needed to borrow it? They hadn't. But they did sound strange. Like they knew something but didn't want to say. Then he called Melissa. She giggled. What's so funny? Ryan's stomach twisted. Oh, nothing. It's just, you're always so stubborn about things. His grip on the phone tightened. Melissa, did you take my bike? More laughter. But nervous this time. I mean, not exactly. But I may have had some friends help me relocate it. Ryan saw red. His sister, unable to handle the fact that she lost their argument, had actually stolen his bike. He had known she was petty, but this was something else. I swear to God, Melissa, if you don't tell me where it is, I'm calling the cops. Silence. Then a panicked rush of words. Oh, relax. It was just a prank. God, you're so dramatic. Where? My bike. Pause. A shuffle of movement. Then a quiet, you should probably check the old reservoir. Ryan's blood ran cold. The reservoir was miles away. Half drained, filled with mud, rusted metal, and the occasional discarded junk. It was also notoriously deep in some spots. His sister had dumped his bike. By the time he arrived at their parents' house, his mother was crying, his father looked exhausted, and Melissa was sulking in the corner like a child caught stealing cookies. I can't believe you did this, Ryan said, his voice ice cold. It was just a joke, she muttered. A joke? You took my transportation and threw it into a ditch? Her friends had finally dragged the bike back after he threatened police involvement. It was ruined, mud caked into the gears, waterlogged, completely unusable. That was when Melissa's carefully crafted mask finally cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from guilt, not from remorse, but from humiliation. People were talking. Their uncle, their cousins, even her classmates. Word had spread. And in a city where stolen bikes were a big deal, Melissa had made herself infamous. By the time Ryan left that night, his sister was barricaded in her room, refusing to face the world. His parents tried once again to guilt him into just letting it go, but for the first time in years, Ryan stood firm. No, he said simply. She needs to learn. And for the first time they had nothing to say. Each of these stories carries a powerful lesson about perseverance, resilience, and the courage to push forward despite challenges. Whether it was overcoming rejection, standing up for what's right, or taking a leap of faith, every journey had obstacles that could have stopped them, but they didn't give up. Life will always test us, but it's our determination and belief in ourselves that define our success. So ask yourself, have you ever faced a situation where you felt like giving up? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if these stories inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep the motivation going.